Well, thank you, everyone, and I think that's really a grand introduction. I've never seen that at an event before, and I think it's actually fantastic. Except, I actually don't focus on supply chain right now. Actually, a few months ago, I've taken on a new responsibility. I actually run industries for Oracle. So I'm responsible for approximately 12 industries, all the way from retail, CPG, high-tech, industrial, manufacturing, financial services, oil and gas, banking, so on and so forth. But I mean, I've been with Oracle for about 14 years now, so from some sense, it's being a veteran. For the last, I would say, 10 years, I've spent a lot of time in the supply chain space. And, I was a board member of APEX and also Supply Chain Council, so really excited to be here. This is actually my first time, and I have to tell you, this is a first-class event. Second to none, and I've attended many, many events in the U.S. and abroad, but by far this is one of the best organized events. So really congratulations to you, and also the number of folks over here and the level of presentations. I happen to sit in a few of those, quite impressive. So my talk today, right, is really about driving intelligence in the supply chain and essentially making supply chains smarter to improve performance. And I think all of us have heard about the whole notion of the Internet of Things and big data and artificial intelligence, and now we've got social and mobile and cloud and all kinds of different technology innovations. But to me, at the end of the day, I think understanding the Internet of Things and understanding big data, I think it's all great, and there's a lot of innovation. But the question is, how do you kind of bring it all together and make it real from a supply chain standpoint? And so I thought that would be an interesting topic, and certainly I think that working with many of our customers, this is something that they're trying to get their arms around in terms of taking these new technologies and making a part of their portfolio to really drive some competitive differentiation in the marketplace. Maybe some of you have heard about Oracle. Oracle is a big company, about $38 billion in annual revenue. Like I said, I've been with Oracle 14 years ago, for 14 years now, and when I joined Oracle in the early 2000s, we were an $8 billion company at the time. I thought, man, this is a big company, what a great place to be. Little did I know, over the next decade, we would acquire 100 companies, investing over $50 billion. And now, you look at our portfolio, it's absolutely second to none in the marketplace. We have over 400,000 customers worldwide, over 120 employees worldwide. It's just remarkable. And what we offer right now is not just applications or technology, it's the end-to-end stack, which is just kind of the broad portfolio. So that's kind of a little bit on the company I work for. And why I say that is because I think we have an opportunity to work with many of our customers who are really big names in the industry, companies like Cisco and GE and others, from whom we actually learn lessons, just the way you hear their stories and their case studies. So I thought today I'd like to cover a couple of things. Number one, talk about the Internet of Things and supply chain and highlight some key trends. This is not a technical talk by any means. This is more about really understanding the applications around IoT and how that they might be meaningful from a supply chain standpoint. The second key point is about IoT and big data. And the whole notion of big data, people kind of don't pay a lot of attention to it. And it's been around for a while now. In fact, in the 90s, it was NASA that first coined the term big data. But essentially, they were separate parallel streams. You had the Internet of Things and you had big data kind of going side by side, and all of a sudden now you see the convergence because there's obviously an interrelationship between them. And then the third point I wanted to highlight is really what we call as the three voices of supply chain that we think companies need to harness in order to be successful and drive performance from an end-to-end standpoint or from an enterprise standpoint. I sat in an earlier presentation by Peter van der Minden, and he did a fantastic job on this whole topic of IoT. Obviously, it was a little bit technical from standpoint, but he really has a great domain. He said, which I think was really impressive to me, was that he counted the number of IoT devices that he uses on a daily basis. And you know how many there were? 45. Everything from his alarm systems to his car keys to his smartphone and Bluetooth and everything else. And I said, let me try to do a mental calculation and see how many I have. And I think I was pretty close to 40 as well. So the fact of the matter is IoT is here. It's been around for a while. People have been using parts of it on the shop floor for a long time. But I think only now it's gaining a lot of prominence, and we're seeing that now a lot of companies are really leveraging this technology to really drive competitive differentiation. I think it's now the leaders, I think, in the enterprises who've kind of, it's captured their imagination, and that's where they want to head. It's the GEs and the Ciscos and Qualcomms of the world. This is a study, and this is kind of an interesting, I think, slide from Cisco. And Cisco's like all in with IoT and the Internet of Things and Internet of Everything. But I think this is an interesting slide because their point of view is by 2022, right? IoT is going to drive approximately $14.4 trillion in value. And I think what's interesting to me is not the number. I mean, who knows whether we're all going to be around in 2022 or not. But the reality of it is their breakdown essentially are the first three numbers. That's 9.4 trillion. And I'll say that all kind of ties in well with supply chain. If you think about it, right, reduced time to market, it's the whole notion of design to delivery. You've got product lifecycle management, product development, all integrated with the supply chain. Improved customer experience, it's order fulfillment. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't fulfill your customer orders, they're not going to be happy. And obviously that's all about customer experience. And then supply chain logistics. I mean, you couldn't get any closer to supply chain. So I think that's a big, impressive number. And this is another, I would say, data point, which I think I'd like to cite. This was a study that was done by Forrester, along with one of our customers called Zebra. And essentially, they interviewed approximately 580 plus, almost 600 executives. And by the way, why I like this slide is because it's global. Oftentimes, the research that these analysts put out tends to be very heavily skewed towards North America. That doesn't kind of paint the true picture. And so I think this is, a good breakdown, because at the end of the day, you're looking at a global picture. And what's interesting here is 80% of those surveyed said that IoT is a critical strategic initiative for them within their enterprise. Almost 65% said that they were in the process of either implementing or going to implement, which means it was it's a very small number that's actually right now not thinking about this. But the survey also said, and it's not over here, is that over the next 2 years, just about 100% of companies would have something within their enterprises tied to IoT. And the number one business benefit that came out of this was customer experience. And so I think quite insightful. On the right-hand side, a couple of big data points again. Market spend on IoT ecosystem. That means it's everything from devices to sensors to infrastructure to services, 1.7 trillion by 2015. This is by IDC. By 2020, I mean, but IDC research was 2015. And then enterprises will spend this year approximately $868 billion just on IoT, which I think is a big number. So we have many customers right now who are working with us in terms of realizing their vision around the Internet of Things, and essentially looking at ways to transform their supply chains and drive value through technologies like IoT. And I'll tell you, talking to a lot of these organizations across different industries, I always come down to 5 things that they focus on pretty much, or whatever your IoT initiative is, it falls within those 5. It's either about predictability, it's about adaptability, it's about innovation, it's sustainability or alignment. And some of them might cross over. You might actually have a couple of these, but at the end of the day, these are the 5 pillars which essentially most companies invest in IoT technologies to drive performance. So, one example, predictability. So we've got, companies in industrial manufacturing and in aerospace and defense, which, they are using IoT primarily for predictive maintenance. And the whole notion of being able to predict, when you're going to be servicing your equipment and so on and so forth is a big thing in aerospace and defense. So that's an example. Same thing with oil and gas. They're running these major operations and refineries, and preventative maintenance is a big thing. Responsiveness and agility, whether you talk about logistics, at the end of the day, the whole integration between transportation and logistics and your mobile supply chain and your end-to-end network, I think is key. And so again, IoT helps some of these companies to do that. And we have a large number of customers in each one of these areas, and sometimes they cross over. The one in the center there, I think is interesting, and that's about alignment. And the two companies that we work very closely with, one is GE, and specifically it's GE Water and Power. And the other ones who've got this end-to-end vision, which is about ensuring that you have the technologies to drive the real-time value chain, and the notion of what they call as the perfect plant. And so it's about driving alignment not only within their enterprise, but across their entire value chain, with their partners. Energy, safety, and regulatory. I think one interesting thing is the public sector, the public sector of cities. Interesting article I just saw, and I think it was in Wall Street Journal. The City of London, they're using pigeons. They're using sensors on pigeons and sending them up in the sky to monitor pollution rates. How clever is that? I mean, I said, that's kind of innovative. Of course, you got the animal rights folks all screaming and saying this is not fair, this is not right, but I think they call them the pigeon patrol, something very interesting. But anyway, these are kind of the 4 or 5 key, pillars where we find a lot of initiatives. Now, oftentimes people talk about the Internet of Things and the value it's going to deliver, and why everybody should jump on this bandwagon, and the one thing they forget is the whole notion of big data. And, Oracle is a database company. We've been in the business of data management for many, many years, but that's not the reason why I'm talking about this. It is because as we talk to our customers in many of our companies, the fundamental problem they have is just getting their arms around the data that they have. If you look at a US company, or for that matter, any company about $1 billion in annual revenue, only about, let's say, about $1 billion company, you have roughly 100 terabytes of data in their enterprise. They are only able to use 25% of it, and only 5% of the data is actually used to make decisions or really drive value. And the reason for that is not because the rest of the data is crap. It's because they just don't know how to harness it, and that's the challenge. So a couple of interesting data points that data across the world or across the planet is going to grow 10x to 44 zettabytes. And I knew somebody might ask me a question, what's a zettabyte? It's 10 to the power of 21 bytes. That's a huge number, right? So the whole notion of companies being able to manage data is becoming a big problem. Now, you could say, well, what do you mean big data? We've heard about this buzzword bingo that everybody talks about. You look at enterprises, and by the way, this is a growing recognition from the folks who are focused on IoT and IoT implementations that the success or failure of IoT depends on big data. And by the way, it's vice versa. So it's not one or the other. It is basically they're mutually dependent on each other. So you could ask me, what's the story with big data, and why does it actually even matter? And the whole notion of big data really comes down to the complexity in terms of what data we're talking about, the types and the variety. There are 5 or 6 key dimensions, in this case we are talking about 5, that really distinguish or add a lot of complexity to big data. And so what do I mean by that? So, an enterprise that's actually capturing data or deals with data on a day-to-day basis, they have to deal with a variety of data. And where's data? It could be a YouTube video, or it could be an email. It could be a social comment on Facebook where somebody has complained about a product or something along those lines, right? That's all unstructured data that's lying outside the universe somewhere, right? But it is directly applicable to your enterprise, it's directly applicable to your products, it's directly applicable to your services. Volume, we already talked about in terms of 44 zettabytes of data over the next decade or so. But the reality is 2.5 trillion gigabytes of data is created every day. And like I said earlier, on an average, a $1 billion company has in excess of 100 terabytes of data, which, by the way, they use probably, like I said, less than 20% of it. You look at the velocity, and what we mean by velocity is real-time nature in the amount of data that you're dealing with. Modern cars have over 100 sensors. I won't tell you what car I drive, but when I drive my car and I go into my mechanic shop or to my dealer, all they have to do is essentially, by the time I open the door, they know everything about the car, because all the information is right in my key. And it's impressive. They know everything about, when was the last maintenance done, what kind of issues that the car has, what kind of, preventative work they need to do, everything, which I think is impressive. But, velocity, and then veracity, right? What's veracity? At the end of the day, garbage in, garbage out. There's a ton of data that organizations have that's useless, right? And so the whole notion of driving data integrity is important. And it's an interesting thing. 1 in 3 executives do not trust the data that they have within their enterprises. That actually tells you that there's a problem with data integrity within the organizations. Now, if you have a problem like that, how are you going to make decisions, right? So the whole notion of getting your arms around this animal is really a set of capabilities that companies need to think about. And for each one of these attributes, or each one of these, I would say, areas, you need to have a set of capabilities. So if you're talking about volume, you need to have solutions, database, or machines that can harness or that can process this huge amount of data in seconds or minutes, right? Data visualization, and that's about harnessing structured and unstructured data. So, people are writing comments on Facebook and LinkedIn and all these sites. What kind of mechanism do you have today to go out and bring all that information in, try to make sense out of it, so that now you know what your customers are saying about you? I can tell you there are not too many companies that are doing that, but that's where the thinking is headed, is to essentially now be able to leverage unstructured data outside your enterprise and combine that, bring it in with structured data to drive value. Veracity, so things like data hubs, these are like solutions that allow you to harmonize, synchronize data, make sure that, whatever data item numbers you have, all that is synchronized across your enterprise so that you have a single source of truth. And then finally, velocity, and that's all about speed, essentially being able to capture streaming data and batch data. So at the end of the day, I think the whole idea behind this is value. And the whole idea of value is how do you extract value out of all this data to make the right decisions. So performance management systems, business intelligence, and something we offer, I've put them in brackets over here, things like Xalytics. These are capabilities that actually allow you to bring in structured, unstructured data and run analytics, complex analytics to really, share with you trends and so on and so forth, the data points which can help you make decisions. And many companies today, leading companies today, are looking at this approach to combine unstructured real-time data with structured data within their enterprises to really drive value. For example, there are companies now looking at point-of-sale information around their customers. A customer walks in a store, or I'll tell you what, Starbucks. You guys know Starbucks coffee. The other day I was walking, and I get a ping on my smartphone, and it's like, hey, we've got a promotion on a cappuccino. You buy one, you get a second one free. They know what I buy at Starbucks. And so that whole notion of having all this information about the customer and being able to offer promotions, I think is the next generation in terms of driving growth in business. And of course, combining what you have internally within your enterprise about that particular customer as well as external. And there are some really good examples here. So Target, I'm sure you might have heard about this big giant retailer, essentially now has this technology where they have beacons. So you walk in, and if you have a Target red card, they are able to very quickly send you a signal on your smartphone and tell you what's on promotion, or this is something you bought last time, you might want to consider something else that augments your product that you bought. So it's all intelligence about you and what you want to really drive sales and make sure you have the best customer service possible. UPS, this is the world's largest parcel company. They have approximately 80,000 trucks worldwide, or vehicles, I should say, because they may be trucks or they may be, other even planes. Each one of those vehicles has roughly about 200 sensors on them, each one of them. And they are able to monitor just about everything in terms of the movement of that vehicle and all the products inside. So they've been able to drive significant information or drive significant efficiency as a result of combining real-time data with static data or enterprise data. Walt Disney World, they spent $1 billion on this initiative. I don't know if you know that. That's a huge amount of money. The whole idea is they have a strap which identifies you. It identifies your interests, your tastes, You can walk into the hotel and check in just with that particular bracelet. And you go to a restaurant, you don't have to pay the bill. They already have you all figured out. They know what you like. So it's all about customer intelligence combined with new technologies to drive value. Now, how do we, as company, and this is something, by the way, I have to say we have worked with GE on, and this is the notion of what we call a smart factory. And really, what this is a demonstration. It's a demo. It's a 2-hour-long demo. And I've got only 3 or 4 screenshots here to kind of give you a flavor of what this is all about. And the whole notion here is that you need to be able to capture the voice of your factory. Could be a supply chain. It doesn't have to be. In this case, we are talking about a factory. The voice of the product itself is the product that you're selling, and the voice of the customer. And this whole animal here has a combination of structured data, unstructured data, real-time data, at-rest data, in-motion data, everything. And so getting arms around this model, I think, is important. And this is something that we worked, like I said, with GE to make happen. So this is an example, a quick slide which shows a factory layout. And the blue boxes that you see really are 3D printers. There are about 40 of those. And the big circles that you see are fans. And these fans really control the temperature, the humidity, the environmental conditions that are required to make sure that those 3D printers, which are, by the way, printing little plastic widgets, could be things like cell phone covers, could be, credit card covers, whatever. Both the industrial fans and the sensors and the 3D printers are fitted with sensors. What this is showing you, and by the way, this is an image from an iPad. So the demonstration is actually done on an iPad, but this is all real time, where we actually have a layout of 40 3D printers, and then you have the supervisor or the manager who's actually running the simulation in real time. But I just captured a couple of screenshots just to make the point. So what you see over here is the red circle there actually is the fan that's gone down. It's not working for some reason. You get an immediate signal. It actually tells you that there's a problem with that particular fan, and that's again, a sensor-based message that you're getting. The other thing is that you can see the 2 yellow boxes on the right. Those are 2 printers that are beginning to heat up because they don't have the actual environmental, the air, the humidity, and the right environmental condition to work, so they're heating up. So it's basically telling you that there is a problem you guys need to fix immediately. At the bottom, you can see some of the key metrics in terms of percent yield, scrap rate, and this is all dynamic, right? This is a static picture, but the reality is when you're seeing the demo, these numbers are changing constantly to make it real time. You actually drill down, and you can literally see that fan down right there on the left-hand top corner. It talks about the maintenance right in the center. When was the maintenance done? What is the mean time to repair? What is the mean time between failures? Why is it overheating? What's a common problem? And you can get any number of metrics that tell you everything you want to know about that particular fan. In the center is one of the machines. It's one of the 3D printers, which actually has processed some past work orders. So the white one right in the center is where it's starting to heat up. It's done 45% of that particular work order. And you're beginning to see that that particular 3D printer is no longer working efficiently. So the whole idea now is your future work orders, the backlog that you see, what do you do about it? Can you assign it to a different printer? And so this is the real-time kind of nature of managing the factory. At the bottom, you can see the live stream in terms of temperature, humidity, vibration, so on and so forth. Now you can actually go up and you can actually get the complete picture. If you're the plant manager or the supply chain executive who's responsible for the entire supply chain for a particular company, you can look at all the metrics. They get aggregated all the way up. And this is probably for the specific plant, but the reality is you can have it for the entire supply chain. So that's kind of what we mean by the voice of the factory, is the real-time nature of understanding every process, every machine, every metric in real time. And that's the voice of the factory to make sure that we actually have a handle on what's going on. So you're able to take remedial measures or preventative measures to make sure that you're addressing any problems that may occur. The voice of the customer, I think everybody knows here, a customer can make or break a product. And anything they say in terms of positives and negatives that's going to really impact your business for that particular product or maybe even your company, and it is directly tied to your brand. So if you're not happy about a service, think about a hotel. You go to a hotel, you look at on Yelp or any of these social sites, and people complain about it, you're going to say, I'm not going to stay there. It's just not good. I'm going to go somewhere else. So really capturing the whole notion of the voice of the customer, I think, is important. And this is where the whole unstructured nature of data comes in. Now, the whole notion here is being able to capture the unstructured nature of the data. What you need to do, or companies are doing right now in terms of technology, is scanning the social environment. Pulling in what people are saying, customers saying, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, parsing that information, applying intelligence to it to really understand what they call as customer sentiment. And you can see a spike over there which says customers are beginning to talk about this product, there's probably a problem, okay? And the whole sentiment analysis is about what are the customers feeling about you? And what is it that's driving it? Is it that the product is bad? Is it an issue with material, or what is it? And then sentiment term analysis, now you're applying things like natural language processing, linguistics, automated sentiment analysis to really bring out or do an analysis around some of the words. So in this case, you can say it's unsatisfactory, cell phone is bad, breaks easily. These are the words that are being pulled out of a whole universe of comments that customers are making. And this is really key because at the end of the day, we talk about supply chains, we're always thinking about pushing the product out. But the reality is we have to really understand what the customers are saying and how do you bring that into your supply chain decision making. Voice of the product, obviously, with IoT, you can understand, what maintenance times you need to do or when you need to service, how is the product being used by your customers. But returns, that's a big issue also because that obviously impacts your profitability. And being able to analyze why products are being returned to you, whether it is, material defect, it's a product defect, it's some problem is important. And things like 5M, man-machine method material management, really looking at it from a multidimensional analytical standpoint to understand why a particular product is not performing the way it should is important. Again, applying linguistic, textual analytics to it, you can really come up with what you call as a heat map around the right words to say, well, okay, this was a cell phone cover, there was a problem with the shape because the 3D printer wasn't performing well, or there was a problem with the extrusion, or the fan wasn't working, or whatever it is. So now, once you're able to have this information, you can do further root cause analysis, and you can see multiple screens. So you're applying now analytics and business decision making to really understand what the problems are and how do you remedy it. And then based on that, essentially you can take actions. So kind of the end-to-end framework here, the last couple of minutes here, is really that, while we talk about demand-driven supply chains and driving efficiency and so on and so forth, it's really important to really have a perspective around getting your arms around data. And this has to be across the three dimensions, demand, supply, product, or customer product, and your supply chain or factory. You have to be able to collect all kinds of data, not just enterprise data. It has to be unstructured, structured. You have to know what your customers are talking about. Bring that into the framework, drive some big data analytics, and obviously you need some of those capabilities to do that because this is not a small amount of data. And then essentially drive actions which are going to impact your profitability. So in closing, and I think I'm right on time, we think that there's obviously a huge opportunity with IoT. There's a tremendous amount of momentum. But oftentimes, I think the initiatives and the projects and implementations that are going on are sometimes misleading, or it's an after data, people are not considering the big picture. So IoT is something that when companies consider that, they have to also consider their data, a big data strategy. Because in order to be successful, you have to make sure that you have both of these in place to make sure you're driving true value. And I think at the end of the day, the three voices, you can't just think about a factory, you can't think about just maintenance. If you really want to truly drive end-to-end transformation and big results, thinking big, right, you have to be able to look at your customers, at your supply chain, and at your products. So with that, I guess I'm ready for any questions.